Peace be with you. Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. My name is Alan Kiesler, and today is Tuesday, the 1st of November, 2016. And we are continuing our discussion about Ra, the sixth density social memory complex. So we will wait a minute while a few more join us for the class. This deep breathing is so helpful. I'm going to do it again and invite you all to join me. Very, very effective, just to calm the mind, to focus the mind. So I'm going to do, just for a minute, another deep breathing. You're welcome to join me. It's amazing how just that little exercise can affect the consciousness. Just that one, taking one deep breath, along with meditating on the name of God or other techniques, how much it affects our consciousness. I highly recommend do that as often as possible. So, we're going to go into more detail today about the history of Ra. As I mentioned yesterday, Ra is a sixth density social memory complex, a very large group of entities who were from Venus. As I explained, Venus evolved more quickly than Earth, began its evolution into first density before Earth, and made very, very rapid advancement because of the harmonious nature of their group. That is, rapid advancement through fourth density, fifth density, and in through sixth density. Excuse me. So, I had mentioned yesterday that they had landed on Earth about 11,000 years ago. I want to say one thing before we go into this, what we consider important sometimes, history, the dates and everything. Ra specifically said when they were explaining this in answer to questions that Don Elkins was asking them, that this sort of history is not very important. And the focus of their coming to Earth and communicating with us is to teach us the philosophy of the law of one, to help us increasingly understand that we are all one and we should not work under the misconception of our individual selves being something that we need to work for separately. Selfishness is not compatible with the law of one, although it has a function within the whole procedure of evolution. The law of one is teaching us how we should all work together, especially at our stage of development, work together in love and compassion. So I just wanted to emphasize that before we get into a few more of these details of Ra's history, that Ra did not want us to focus on their history, but to focus on the message. So, but they said it's okay, it's not harmful to hear a little about their history as long as we don't let that detract us from the real purpose of their contacting humanity, which is to teach the philosophy of the law of one. So with that clearly in mind, we will go back a little bit to the history. As I had said yesterday, Ra had been observing our planet. In one sense, we are their little brothers, because we're from little brothers and sisters, because we're from the nearby next door planet. So they had been watching with interest our development, and actually they visited in the sense of traveling in our skies about 16,000 years ago. At that time they did not land, they did not make themselves physically visible on the ground, and they didn't interact, they didn't show themselves in that way, but they did appear flying in spaceships above the Earth's surface. And again, that was at Egypt. As I recall, they were mainly visible in Egypt. And they had influenced the society at that time. It was not strange for those people, because they believed in many gods. They believed in beings who could fly in the sky. So it wasn't anything shocking or disturbing to them. It didn't disturb their free will, which of course, as I've mentioned and stressed even, the one of the most basic principles of not interfering in the development of other cultures, not infringing on their free will. So because it wasn't a big thing for these people on Earth to see these beings flying in the sky, for that reason it didn't really infringe on their free will. And the same thing is actually going on now, that to a large extent many people have not seen flying saucers. A number of people have, but it's because those entities don't want to infringe on our free will. They don't want to force themselves upon us. So sometimes people inquire, well, why haven't the extraterrestrials made themselves more visible? It is, to some extent at least, because people on Earth don't want to see them, don't want to be aware of the fact that there are much more advanced civilizations elsewhere. So therefore, they're not shown. They don't show themselves to these people. And those of us who have had contact in one way or the other, it's because we wanted it, because we were ready for it, and we were even eager for it. So in that time period, about 16,000 of our years ago, Ra made themselves visible, but did not land, and had some influence on some helpful influence, we can say, on the development of that society by their presence. And of course they communicated telepathically with people. Then 11,000 years ago they landed. Now I'm a little bit uncertain myself about the exact chronology, but since Ra said it's not important, I'm not worrying about it too much. But at some period of time during history of Egypt, sometime between 11,000 years ago and 6,000 years ago, Ra came and physically manifested themselves on the planet in a form. It was different than that of Earth people. It was similar to or based upon their sixth density form, so they were able to make themselves visible to the third density Egyptians, to some of them at least. And as I said yesterday, they were worshipped as gods. Their bodies were tall, they had a golden color or effulgence, and they were different than Earth people, so it was natural for the Egyptians to think of them as some sort of divine beings. Of course, that was not Ra's intention. They did not want to be worshipped. They wanted to be simply accepted as messengers of the Law of One. And they actually contacted one specific pharaoh who is known to us, although the exact dates of his rulership are not there. There's some controversy among modern scholars, also historians, as to when exactly he was the pharaoh. And there's also some confusion, as I said, in my mind, as exactly when this happened. But his name actually was Amenhotep, or Amenhotep. But Amen, or Amen, was one of many gods that the Egyptians worshipped. And he understood the Law of One. He understood, through Ra's influence or due to his own more positive and wise orientation, he was very easily influenced and accepted the teachings of Ra, and he then changed his name, which referred to one God among many, to Akhenaten. Aten was identified with the sun disk as a god, but was the idea of one God, that there is only one God. So he changed his name to reflect his understanding that there is only one God, and he taught that. Unfortunately, the people, especially the priests, were not willing to accept this teaching, and they were attached to their old beliefs and ideas. So although he was the pharaoh and was able to implement his ideas and teachings, and because they believed the pharaoh was also divine, so they had to sort of do what he said. But after he passed away, then they quickly reverted to their polytheistic system. So Ra's effort was not really successful, and in fact, very quickly, the whole idea of their coming was integrated into their polytheistic system, and Ra was made another god among the other Egyptian gods. So this is just, it's a good lesson for us, those of us who may be wanderers, who have compassion and who have desire to serve others and to help others. We have to be also intelligent. That is, we have to balance the love and compassion of fourth density with the wisdom of the fifth density. And in the sixth density, that is what is being done. And of course, Ra was not fully integrated, we can say, into sixth density, hadn't fully balanced the wisdom and love, and was very compassionate and wanted to help the earth people. And as I said yesterday, we can't really say they were a failure. Ra doesn't consider it a failure, but it was a learning experience for Ra. And we can also learn from their experience that we must balance our compassion with wisdom. Because it's natural for a wanderer to be compassionate to people who we may see as needing help, but we have to be very intelligent in how we help people. So it's another group. I think they were part of Ra also. I'm not exactly clear on this, but there was another group of sixth density beings who went to South America at the same time as Ra appeared in Egypt. This other group appeared in South America and taught the law of one to the people there, and they were a little more successful, you might say, but we don't have much information about that. But they did stay a little bit longer. Ra left quite quickly after their attempt to introduce the law of one teachings in a very egalitarian way, we can say, a democratic way, you might want to say, a way in which everyone was equal, everyone was one, and that, of course, was replaced with the hierarchical idea, the stratified idea that there are superior human beings, the pharaoh, the priests, the ruling classes, and then there are the common people who are below them. So nobody is below anybody else in the law of one teachings. That's very, very important. And the tendency that we human beings have, and actually it has to do partly with our genes. That is, we have been genetically engineered. It's an interesting idea, but it's true. We have been genetically engineered by different groups of extraterrestrials. And so our tendency, one of our tendencies is to adore a superior, to worship and to follow a superior, rather than really to think for ourselves. So the tendency to create a leader, to create a guru, to create a great Sufi saint who then others will even worship or follow blindly, that is a tendency that we have, but it's not that favorable. It has a lot of negative consequences for our own spiritual development. So while it is important to learn from teachers, it's important not to worship them and accept them blindly. We have to remain intelligent, and I ask all of you, because some people have even asked me if I have some sort of special position. No, I am an ordinary human being. I make a lot of mistakes, So please don't put me up on a pedestal either, like the people did to Ra. So we all have to work together as equals. We are all equal, although some are a little older, more senior to others, not only in age on this planet, but in terms of our own spiritual development. Some are older than others, but that doesn't mean that anyone is superior to others. So the Ra group, or the sixth density group that went to South America, was a little more successful in teaching that to the people there than Ra's experience in Egypt. So Ra left after their initial visit, in which they physically manifested themselves, and they then came back about 8,500 years ago. And then I think this is not completely clear to me again, but it appears that they didn't physically manifest themselves, definitely, but they communicated with the people telepathically, and there was some response to them. And for a period of about 1,500 years, as I understand, they continued. Now, about the year 6000 is when the Great Pyramid was built, according to one other statement in Ra. Another place it appears that that pyramid was built when they came in the year 11,000 years ago. So it's not completely clear to me of those dates, but those dates are not important. But anyway, they were present for a longer period of time, and they did have a significant influence. But again, they were not able to really succeed in establishing a long-lasting presence of people on Earth who were teaching and following the law of one. So they again left. And of course now we're very fortunate that they have returned, and this is just in the recent past, although they may have been observing us for centuries or millennia, we don't know exactly. They haven't spoken too much about that intermediate period. But we know that in the 20th century, Ra returned and telepathically communicated through the channel Carla Ruckert and taught the law of one in these 4 volumes that we have, which we should all study the philosophy. And meditate on the philosophy. This is very, very important that we understand oneness. The social memory complex, Ra, is a very interesting group. They're all one. And actually we're all one. In truth, everyone is all one. We're not separated from each other. We are all inseparable. But we have the experience of separateness, which we chose to undergo this experience because we could learn things from it. But in fact, we're all one. We are all parts of one totality. So that doesn't mean that we somehow lose our individuality. The social memory complex is not like a hive consciousness. That is, there are certain societies, some present on Earth even, and some from other solar systems and other star systems, where there really is like a hive mentality. It's like an insect mentality where the individuals do not really think for themselves. They just move together under the influence of either a leader or of a consciousness of a group, and there's very little individuality. So Ra is not that sort of hive in being a social memory complex. They remain individuals, and I just wanted to mention a couple of things more about Ra to help us understand this. As I said earlier, they were much in advance of us in terms of time, in terms of development. About 2.6 billion of our years ago is when they were in third density, when they ended their third density experience. So that was a long time ago. That's why they're so much more advanced than we are. And there are about 6,500,000 members who entered into this social memory complex on Venus back in their 4th density time. And it's interesting that they explained that those were the ones on Venus who were harvested into fourth density. When the planet, as our planet is doing right now, as a planetary complex changing from third density to fourth density, these 6,500,000 Venusians were able to graduate into fourth density on Venus, and they became Ra, the social memory complex. And there were actually a much larger number, about 36 million, or 32 million rather, of those people on Venus at that time who were not ready, not able to graduate into fourth density. So they had to return to third density, and since Venus itself was no longer in the third density level, they had to go other planets. They went elsewhere to continue their third density development, to repeat the third density cycle, to learn the lessons so they could graduate in the future into fourth density. So I just wanted to stress this point about two points about Ra's history that help us understand the nature of the individuality within the social memory complex. One was that they mentioned, when they were asked about if they've gone to other galaxies, they said they haven't traveled, but they are in contact, that is, you can say telepathic contact, with many other galaxies. There's no limitation for sixth density beings in that way, that they don't have to travel because they can be in contact on a telepathic level. But some of their members have gone as wanderers to other galaxies. So that's interesting. That was interesting to me, that some of the members, although they are part of the social memory complex, they can go physically, I guess that means, to other galaxies and have an experience there. But what they experience, the entire social memory complex also learns, because they are in perfect telepathic communication with each other. So they are both individuals who can, by their own free choice, having compassion on other groups elsewhere and receiving a call from them, because they don't go unless they're called, unless they're invited. So some of them did go to other galaxies and perform the service of wanderers there, although Ra, as the social memory complex, the whole group, did not travel. So that's one example of an individual, or individuals doing things separately, you might say, in one sense, from the social memory complex, not separated. They remained in full union and communion, but they were traveling separately. So there's another very interesting example that they talked about. They were asked, Ra was asked by Don Elkins about some more details about negative polarity on Venus, and were there some beings that graduated into fourth density negative, because as I've explained before, there is both negative and positive polarity, and if somebody is very loving and compassionate, as we're trying to become right now, then as we're hoping that many more people on Earth will become, so that we can all graduate into fourth density together, fourth density positive. If somebody is very strongly negatively oriented, they can also go into fourth density negative. And even fifth density negative exists, although sixth density negative polarity is not really compatible. One cannot remain in that because of the wisdom and love being integrated. Then that negative polarity can't remain. But in fourth density it can. So it was very interesting. Ra answered the question, said that none of the original Venusians who had graduated from second density into third density then graduated into fourth density negative. However, there were two members of Ra who were negatively polarized into fourth density and graduated into fourth density in the negative polarity. And their example is instructive, very instructive in several ways. One, as I'm talking about, it shows how one can be an individual even within a social memory complex. So there were two individuals who were actually wanderers who had come to Venus. They were fifth density, early fifth density positive polarity, not strongly positive, but they were compassionate on some of the people on Venus when they were in third density. And these Venusians, these residents of Venus, were in third density. They were sort of not really negatively polarized, but they didn't have a strong polarity, positive or negative, whereas the whole society was very positively oriented, very loving, very compassionate in third density, getting ready to enter fourth density in positive. And these individuals, they saw this strong compassion as being too compassionate, as they felt they were not wise in their, and they sort of pitied those people. They saw they considered them as having an overabundance of love and compassion. So these two entities, who were early fifth density entities elsewhere, and were invited by those people, those Venusians, who were sort of looking down on the vast majority of their fellows, they wanted somebody to come, they asked for somebody to come and help them, to please help us develop more wisdom. So they responded to that call, and they joined the society of Ra, and they joined the Venusian society, which was in third density, getting ready to graduate into fourth density. And what's interesting, what happened was, and this is a danger that wanderers face, because you must forget your pre-existence when you enter into a third density as a wanderer. So they, of course, had forgotten, and they were influenced by those people who they came to help. In other words, these people that had a slightly negative tendency to look down on their fellows, they also sort of developed that mentality. And because they were wanderers, they were much more powerful than ordinary Venusians, so they became the leaders. Actually, there were two of them, one female and one male embodiment on Venus at that time. They worked together, and this group of their followers started, offering them a position and respect, and this sort of, we could say, sort of went to their heads. So they started developing a negative tendency, that negative tendency of domination and rulership and control, and getting others to follow them, maybe even blindly, but certainly to give them a superior position. And that maybe felt good to them, or somehow they developed those negative tendencies, which is a danger we all who may be wanderers have to guard against, because it's very easy when you have a position as a fifth or sixth density being or fourth density being who's come into third density, you may be recognized as having some special experiences or special powers or abilities. So people may tend to put you up on a pedestal, as happened when Ra came here in Egypt 11,000 years ago. So we have to be very careful not to allow ourselves to be put up like that. So, but that happened to these two wanderers, and they actually turned negative. And because they were powerful beings, they graduated into fourth density negative. It's very interesting and instructive. And of course, because of their previous tendencies, because of their previous training, when they were there in fourth density negative, after some time, their previous patterns of thought influenced them to the extent that they realized they have to get out of this situation they've put themselves in, and they managed to change their polarity back to positive, although with great effort. Ra explains it was with great effort that they were able to do this. So this idea of controlling over others and becoming a leader, a religious leader especially, or a religious political leader, and getting worshipped by others, that sort of danger they are an example of. And then they joined the social memory complex of Ra. So they were not Venusians, they were wanderers who had come from elsewhere, but they got stuck in fourth density Venus with a negative polarity, but then they were able to rejoin positive polarity beings there, and they became part of the social memory complex Ra. So this shows how the social memory complex doesn't mean people aren't individuals within it, but there is no sense of separation. There's no sense of working for myself separately. There's no sense of that sort of selfish orientation. So this is a little bit about the history of Ra. Let me just review my notes if I've missed anything here that I was planning to talk about. I think that's everything. Maybe just there was one point I wanted to clarify, that it's interesting that those who called them, those Venusians who called the wanderers in response to their call, which those two people made, and they came to Venus, they themselves, they were not negatively polarized very strongly. They were sort of neutral. So it is possible to be neutral, but one cannot graduate with that sort of neutral mentality. One has to be strongly positively oriented to graduate into fourth density positive, or one has to be very strongly negatively oriented to graduate into fourth density negative. So those two entities, because they were powerful and they developed a strong negative tendency of controlling and ruling over others, they graduated into fourth density, but none of their followers did. So, because they weren't strong enough. So that was an interesting point that and just to explain this a little bit more, these Venusians, they were kind of looking down on their fellows as being too compassionate, too loving, and not balanced, not loving enough, and not wise enough in their ways of compassion and love. So, they weren't negatively polarized. That may have been a misconception, or maybe it was somewhat correct, that the Venusians were very loving and were not balanced enough in terms of wisdom. But the result of that was that they called these wanderers, the wanderers came, and they experienced this sad history, we can say, or we don't have to say it's sad. It was, they learned something, and we all have learned something from their experience, but they switched. They were positive polarity, fifth density beings. They came into third density, switched their polarity. Third density beings, negatively polarized, graduated into fourth density with a negative polarization, and then with great difficulty were able to revert again to fourth density positive. So yeah, so they had to retrace their fourth density positive development then. Again, they had, had their previous patterns, but then they had to work again to go through the fourth density positive development and come back into fifth density again. So that's just a little bit of the history of Ra that I thought I would share with you. So our half hour is up. I will see if we have any questions. I'm finding this fascinating to learn these things and to share them with you. And let's see if we have any good questions here. Joanna Sahiba asks, to graduate to the fourth, what do we do to reach that from here? So maybe I had answered the question without having seen the question. But again, to graduate into fourth density, we have to become very compassionate, loving, and one of the most important practices is just to serve others and to meditate, to prepare ourselves for a higher consciousness by making our mind calm and peaceful, by meditating on higher truths, by meditating on God, the name of God, and by seeing others as not separate from ourselves. When we serve others, we're actually serving ourselves, because we are not separate from others. So that's the most important thing, is to develop that law of one awareness, that actually when we do, as Jesus said, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, we actually are doing to others what we're doing to ourselves. What we do to others, we actually are doing to ourselves. So we should realize this. We should understand this, not only theoretically, but in our practice. And of course, great saints have always served others and taken care of other people's needs, even above their own, but certainly equally with their own. So we should not deny ourselves in the sense of causing, problems or difficulties to ourselves by serving others, as sometimes happened. Those two wanderers who went to Venus, third density, they were being compassionate to those people, but then they got influenced by them and suffered as a result. So we should be careful. We don't want to suffer as a result of being compassionate to others. We don't want to lose our spiritual development. It's possible to some extent, but we can recover it, of course. So we want to be loving and compassionate to others, but also be aware of our own needs. All right, let's see if we have any other questions. Zain Khan has asked, what are you talking about? So again, this is, I'm assuming that those who are hearing me now have listened to some of the previous classes. I'm giving classes every day, Monday through Friday at 6:30 p.m. and every Saturday an Urdu chat in which I review the material that I've covered in the English class that week. So if you haven't seen the previous classes, then it might be a little difficult to figure out what's going on here, because I'm using these terms, densities, etc., very freely. So I can only say that Zain Khan Sahib, if you are not clear what this all is, if you can't understand what I'm talking about, then please go and look at the previous classes. Watch the, you can go to my website, allintelligentlife.com. There all of the classes are posted with a short summary, which makes it very easy to see what's going on, and then you can listen to some of the classes. You can start from the beginning, and then it will all be clear what we're doing now, what we're talking about at this point. Hadi Rizvi Sahib, Assalamu alaikum ji, has asked a longer question here. Is this graduation possible only in our present bodily dimension, or can it continue in spirit later when the soul departs? Are these beings also something like soul beings? The graduation from third density into fourth density is possible at any time when we're ready for it. It's even possible, although it's rare, that it happens at some other time besides the Day of Judgment periods. At those particular times of ascension or graduation, there's a special opportunity to graduate. After the first 25,000-year cycle of the 75,000-year cycle, at the second 25,000-year cycle's end, that was at the 50,000-year period, and then at the end of the third cycle, which is right now, the 75,000-year time, graduation is sort of required because the planet graduates. So only those people on that planet who are ready for transition into fourth density at that time will be able to enter into that planet's fourth density. And those who are not ready, which at the present time actually is the vast majority of people who are the residents of this earth, are not ready really to graduate into fourth density, so will have to remain in third density existence. And since the planet will transform into a fourth density planet, those persons will have to go elsewhere for continuing their third density development. But it's possible at any time, actually, not only at those conclusions of those 25,000-year cycles. Anyone who becomes qualified can transform into fourth density being, can graduate into fourth density at any time, either in this lifetime now. Hopefully we all will do that. Those of us who are wanderers in one sense already have graduated into fourth density, and we're here to help other people become ready to graduate into fourth density. But let us, not be puffed up thinking we're so advanced. We may be wanderers, but we should be very, very humble and not look down on others, which is a danger that can happen and has happened sometimes to wanderers. So we have to be very humble and participate in this process of becoming more loving and compassionate, harmonious, working together, serving others, both as an example and to make sure that we also remain in that positive orientation and make progress. So the question is, are these beings also something like soul beings? That's the second question, I suppose. I'm not completely clear what this question is referring to. Are you referring to Ra by saying these beings? Or are you referring to those who graduate into fourth density? Well, we are all soul beings. So we are now in these third density bodies. Our consciousness may be fourth density, fifth density, any density. But if you're talking about Ra, yes, you can say there's something like soul beings. By that I think you mean higher level of spiritual development than an ordinary third density being without a strong positive polarity. So I hope I've answered the question. I'm just going to look at it one more second time. Is this graduation possible only in our present bodily dimension, or does or can it continue in spirit later when the soul departs? Yes, it can be done later. It can be done at any time when one is ready for it. But if one is going to graduate into fourth density on this planet, then it has to be done at this time. And those who do not graduate into fourth density at this time on our planet, they will remain in third density, but will have to go elsewhere to continue third density development. All right, elsewhere, Salma Aziz Mirza is asking, what does it mean by going elsewhere? It means going to another planet where third density existence is possible and is prominent. So that could be another planet in some other star system. It could be possible even in another galaxy. Usually I think people remain in the same solar system, just like we know when Mars, and also Maldek, but especially Mars, when Mars was destroyed by war, that is, the atmosphere was changed so it was no longer suitable for third density beings to live there and remain in their progressing in their third density, they were transferred en masse to Earth, which was at that time just beginning its third density. So they were transferred to another planet. So that's what being elsewhere, going elsewhere means, going to another planet, which generally, as I understand, is in the same solar system. But if there is no other planet suitable in that solar system, then they would have to go to some other star system to continue their third development. Shujaddin Qureshi is asking, is Abraham Hicks the same Ra? I don't know. I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I believe that Ra made it clear that they are not speaking to other groups or through other people. I may be wrong, but that's my understanding. Hadi Rizvi is asking, what is the concept of bodily death? Bodily death simply means that the body becomes no longer functional, and so the spirit leaves the body. Just like if we're in a room and something happens, we have to leave that room, we leave that room. So we don't die at death, simply the bodily room becomes uninhabitable for whatever reason, and so we go out the door into somewhere else. All right, there have been some good questions, and this has been a very interesting class for me to prepare this class and to learn more about Ra, study it in some detail, and the lessons that we can learn ourselves from the examples of especially those two wanderers who have joined Ra, and understanding a little more about what it means to be part of a social memory complex, because that's actually what's happening now. That's what is happening on Earth, that Earth is developing that fourth density consciousness, which individuals can become integrated within each other and learn from each other perfectly because of understanding each other's minds and thoughts and feelings by telepathy. So it's a wonderful way of life to live in a social memory complex in full harmony and love with each other. And that's what we're facing right now, this opportunity. So Shahajuddin Qureshi is now asking, there are other channels like Brahma Baba at Mount Abu in India. They speak like... I guess the question is not complete here. Yes, there are many channels, and I myself have acted as a channel sometimes. It's dangerous. Let's just say it's dangerous. Being a channel means you open yourself up to some other being, and you have to be careful that that being is very positive, because there are always negative entities also who are looking for channels to channel through, perhaps to mislead people. So there are many channels. I've never heard of this Brahma Baba at Mount Abu in India, but I know there are many channels. In the United States also there are many people who are doing channeling. Some may be quite good, and some may be well-intentioned. Some could be wanderers, but then get misled by other entities. So channeling is a dangerous practice. One has to do it very carefully. In fact, in the case of the Law of One material, which was channeled through Carla Ruckert, she had the practice even before she began channeling Ra, and she was a channel. She was doing channeling. She would challenge the entity who came to her when she was going into a trance, and a being would come. She was open to being a channel. Whoever came, she would challenge them. Are you here in the name of Christ? Are you here for Christ consciousness? Are you here for a spiritual purpose? And she was able to discriminate that way from a positive-oriented being to a negatively one, and she would then not allow the negative ones to channel through her. So if channels aren't very careful like that, they can become channels of negative forces, and that has happened to many, many channels. They may have been well-intentioned, but they may have been misled even by some negative entities. So we have to be very careful about channeling. Fortunately, I think the Ra channeling that Carla Ruckert did, which is now fully recorded in the Law of One books, was very successful in maintaining a pure and positive channel. All right, so the Brahma Kumari University Shahajuddin Qureshi is saying, again, I will just repeat, there are many channels. Some may be good, some may be very good, others may be mixed, good intention, well-intentioned, but some negative material comes through. So we have to be very, very discriminating ourselves, very careful what channel information we accept. Okay, let me just check the time. We have a few more minutes if anybody has any more questions, otherwise we can end now. So I will just repeat one last time that this information that we are receiving from the Law of One books, which is what I've been basing this class on for the past week and for the first part of this week, this is teaching us the philosophy of the Law of One, which, as I've mentioned, I understand that to be Tawheed, the teaching, the Islamic teaching of oneness, oneness of God, means that all things, everything actually, is inseparable from God. Everything is part and parcel of God. Everything is the power of God. So therefore everything is one. And nobody has really any separate self-interest. Our interest of all of us is the same, the interest of God. So this philosophy of the Law of One is really what we should be stressing, not so much, as I've perhaps been doing, the history of Ra or the history of our solar system. That is interesting, and it's perhaps, because it's interesting, people will learn the Law of One material, but the really important thing is to understand and become immersed in this philosophy and the practice of oneness, serving others. So there are a few more comments here. Are the negative channels keep the same powers like God? They have not powers like God, although some people think they're God actually. They do have psychic powers often, yes. And that's one of the dangers of channeling, that one can become a channel of a negative force, and one can receive powers, and one can act in ways that convince people that that person is God. That has happened many times. So Shabana Ali is asking, what about indigo souls and souls from higher planes, galaxies? Are they going home soon? Well, I'm not sure quite what you mean here by going home soon. Do you mean, usually we're talking about, well, the indigo souls, as I understand it, what are called indigo souls are generally wanderers. That is, there are persons who have come to this planet not as ordinary earthlings in third density who are trying to graduate into fourth density, but who are already fourth, fifth, sixth density or higher beings who have come to this planet to assist in this time of ascension or graduation. So are they going home soon? I guess the answer is yes, if you mean are they graduating, because they've actually already graduated. Evolved ones, I mean, yes, they are already evolved. They're already fourth density at least, or more. So indigo souls, I think, may be just a synonym for wanderers. They are already evolved. So they are here, or we are here, because probably many of us are in that category. That's why you're interested in this class and are listening to it, because you are already more evolved, and most people aren't interested in these topics. So yes, we are going home soon, back to our real home. Why they want us to improve. Why they and us, I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean why do they, meaning Ra, want us to improve, or do you mean the wanderers want us to improve? It's just out of compassion. They see that it's good for us, and they see themselves as not separate from us. So we are part of them, so they naturally want all their parts to benefit and to improve. So I hope that I've answered your question correctly. So Shabana Ali is making it clear, exactly graduating and leaving the planet Earth. It doesn't really matter where we are so much as the level that we are, whether we are on Earth or we're on any other planet, any other specific place. That's not what's important. What's important is for our consciousness to come to a higher level, to keep growing spiritually. So as it happens, the planet is graduating into fourth dimension, fourth density. So anyone who doesn't graduate now in consciousness to fourth density will not remain on this planet. Will have to go elsewhere for continued third density existence. Okay, thank you all very much. These are some very, very interesting topics, and again I will conclude by thanking you and asking you to please look at the Law of One. That book is available online. Just do a search for it. You'll find it quite easily. And a comment by, again, Sama Aziz Mirza. Yesterday saw a dream of seeing indigo jasmine. So dreams are significant, and sometimes it's difficult to understand what they mean, but it's good to keep a journal even. It's good to remember your dreams and write them down, because you can learn things from them. And if you don't remember your dreams, some people remember a lot of dreams and some people don't. I don't remember that many dreams. My wife remembers her dreams much more than I do. But what I'm trying to do is learn to remember my dreams more, so I'm joining with you in what I'm recommending now. Make a conscious decision when you're going to sleep that I want to remember my dreams so that I can learn something from them. And gradually we can learn to understand dreams better and learn the lessons from them that we can. Of course, many dreams may not be particularly instructive. There are different types of dreams, but often we can learn from our dreams. So it's good to remember our dreams and even write them down, often quickly, because we may forget them very quickly after waking up. but we certainly can, and I have often throughout my life learned significant lessons from my dreams. So thank you all very much. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. May God protect us all.